let me just talk a little bit about the Walkabout Committee. The Walkabout Committee was composed of members of the nominating committee and members of the standing committee. And what we did was to create a set of 6 questions that will be asked tonight. And we based those questions on the questions that many of you submitted for us as your suggestions, things that you wanted to hear from our candidates about. What we did was to take your suggestions, and let me just thank you for those. Those are invaluable to us because it gave us an idea of what's on your mind, what you were concerned about. And we spent considerable time then looking those over, sorting them out, saying, if we had 3 or 4 questions that were about one thing, how can we kind of boil that down and make one question out of it? And then, once we got it down to like 20, then we said, okay, we need to keep whittling it down. And that was really the hard part, because what we had to do then is to get it down to 12 questions. And 6 are going to be asked tonight. The other 6 were asked last night at Truro. So those questions were a different set than the set you're going to hear tonight. And one of the things that I want to say about these questions is that it really isn't possible to ask all the things that you want to hear about. It was a struggle as a committee for us to figure out which are the best questions. And so one of the things that we did was to say, well, were these questions that we had asked in some form or fashion previously? Because these 3 have endured several interviews with us. And one good example of that was a number of people wanted to hear how they viewed the sanctity of life and the questions surrounding abortion. And we had already asked that in one of our interviews, and what we found was that all 3 of these men gave us responses that were very soundly biblical and very much in keeping with the canons, both of our diocese and of the ACNA. And so we decided then not to include those in our questions tonight or last night. So in terms of our process then, each of our candidates tonight are going to be asked the same questions, the same set of 6. And this will allow you to compare their answers, because each of them is going to come at it from their own perspective, and they will share what these questions bring up for them. Now, we did not include any questions that were specific just to one candidate. And so for those of you that submitted questions for a specific candidate, and there were a number of those that came to us, you will have that opportunity tonight after the program. We will have a reception afterwards downstairs, and our candidates will be available. We encourage you to come and meet them personally. And if you have specific questions, either about something they said tonight that you would like to clarify, or just something that's on your mind that we didn't ask about, it would be very appropriate for you to ask the questions during the reception. The candidates received the first question that we were going to ask tonight. We decided we would kind of ease them into this evening. It is not easy to stand up here and to be faced with questions that you haven't heard. Of course, that's all part of being a bishop, right? That happens at every one of your churches when the bishop comes to visit. They're going to get these questions. And so part of it is to say, this is what it means. This is part of the job. But we thought we'd kind of ease them in, so we gave them the first question and said, okay, this is the first thing we're going to ask you, just to get them rolling. The second question, we didn't give them the question, but we gave them the topic. We said it's going to be about this topic. And so they could at least be thinking about the topic. But then the next 4 questions will come to them completely cold. And they will have the 4 minutes then, at that point, to respond to each of those questions. Lynn Milgrano, our diocesan administrator, is sitting in the front pew, and she has an iPad with a countdown timer on it. And so she will start at the beginning of each question. She will start that timer. They have 4 minutes to think about it and respond. So they're not going to give you the definitive answers that we all know they have, but they're going to give us 4 minutes worth, okay? And so we at least know what their thoughts are. Now, if it should happen that they're still finishing a response at the end when the timer comes to 0, then I will gently interrupt them, and we will go on to the next question. So earlier this evening, a speaking order was established, and while the first candidate is speaking, the other 2 candidates and their wives will be back in a separate room, and they will not be able to hear what's being said, and that is intentional.